Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you today. I watched another edition of Monday Night War. This is the one that I initially sat down to watch before seeing that the one about building an army hadn't finished last week. So basically, I finished that one and then moved on to this one. This was awesome. I mean, this was basically the first portion of this DVD was almost taken exactly from the Triple H DVD, just explaining who the Kliq was, who the movers and shakers of the group was, setting the tone of how they came together, and basically talking about them, breaking apart and controlling the biggest boom in wrestling. I guess you can say that we've seen, at least in my lifetime. This was all about basically Shawn Michaels bringing in Diesel into the WWF to be his bodyguard. At that point, they already had Razor Ramon, who was working mid-card matches. Of course, everybody knows about Shawn versus Razor at WrestleMania 10. They were really tearing things up, and as they were moving, going through the motions of what they were doing, basically these guys started riding together because they all sort of had the same, we'll call them hobbies, and they all really got along with each other. They brought in the 1-2-3 Kid, X-Pac, Six, however you like to call him, Sean Waltman, as sort of a way to sort of bring a new guy, as pushing a new guy to the top of the company. You can see that with Razor Ramon doing the job to the 1-2-3 Kid on Monday Night Raw as one of the first real moments of the first editions of Monday Night Raw that really gave it a buzz of like anything could happen on the show, because largely they would give you a main event match, and sometimes that main event match would be Sid versus Virgil or something like that, where it's two names, but at the end of the day the two names don't really mean anything at the end of the day. But it was bigger than anything that was going on Superstars or USA Wrestling or a wrestling challenge, anything else that was going on, that was going out there. That's really what gave it the first jump, that it was must-see television, that you had to see it, because at any time one of these jobber guys could beat one of these main stars and become somebody. From there, they talked about how they used to like sitting down and watching the Saturday night WCW shows. It might even have been the Saturday morning show, because they said they laughed about how bad it was. But as they were watching this show, Terra Rising, who would become Triple H, would be on this show, and he would be a guy that would really stand out, that they really liked the way this guy worked, and they noticed a lot of things that could be really good about him. So basically, the time came when Terra Rising left WCW and came to the WWE as Triple H. Because of a mutual friend, Terry Taylor, these guys were reunited, or introduced together, I guess, pretty much. And they started riding together and just basically moving their way up the ranks. At the time of wrestling, that you can see that through a lot of these Monday Night War episodes, it basically was the Kliq on top of the WWF that was really supporting everything they were going. You had Diesel, you had Shawn Michaels in the main event, whether if they were a team, whether if they were opponents, it always worked. You had Razor Ramon, you had the 1-2-3 Kid, you had Triple H really holding down the mid card, really supporting the Intercontinental Championship and really getting those smaller feuds over. Everything else underneath there, it was what it was. I mean, you still had Undertaker that was in the company, but except for that, I mean, really, Bret Hart, once you get past that point, the talent roster gets very, very slim and very, very small. Very funny story that Shawn Michaels tells about, the first night that Diesel gets there, he gets brought in to be his bodyguard. He tells him, hey, we got a huge amount of heat on us. The other day I was talking about The Undertaker, I called him Carrot Top behind his back, and he's kind of pissed. So basically Kevin Nash is like, so I guess this isn't really just, a work. I mean, this is the shoot, that you really are bringing me in here to be your bodyguard in case something goes down. You don't want Undertaker kicking your ass. They don't really tell the story about what happened. Basically, it was WCW, Eric Bischoff coming to Scott Hall and offering a certain amount of money, lesser dates, more money, and that got the interest of Scott Hall. I mean, Scott Hall sort of had been that mid-card guy for a long time. He probably wanted to make more money. He probably wanted to get that jump, and he'd been in WWF long enough to notice maybe they weren't going to make him a main eventer. I mean, the amount of main events he had was very small. You can think of the match at the Royal Rumble. I believe it was shoot, is that 93? The one that was here in Sacramento with him going up against Bret Hart. You can think of Razor Ramon and Ric Flair going up against the Megamaniacs at Survivor Series, and except for that, he just was sort of like this mid-card guy. WrestleMania 10 was a big-time feature for him. A lot of people remember how great that match is. A lot of people don't really remember that Scott Hall won that match. People always really think of Shawn Michaels. Ric Flair even, talks about how Ric Flair always talks about how Shawn Michaels wrestled a ladder inside of the ring that night. But Shawn, no, not Shawn, I apologize, but Razor, Scott Hall, got to the point where he was going to take the offer from Eric Bischoff, and somehow, one way or another, Diesel, Kevin Nash, was having it out with Vince McMahon a little bit about, I think he wanted more money at this point, and basically got to the point where he was going to take the money as well, and the Kliq was going to split up. So you had half of the guys going over to WCW. They become the Outsiders, which really revolutionizes wrestling. They take over Monday Nitro with Hulk Hogan at the Bash at the Beach 1996, shocking the world that Hulk Hogan would turn heel. They become the coolest bad guys that we've ever been able to see. And at the same point, they start stealing these rating points away from WWE. And they're winning this war. At the same time, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, they come up with the idea of DX, putting themselves together. Triple H is no longer Hunter Hearst Helmsley. He does become like a Shawn Michaels sidekick, but he's able to wear normal clothes and just be a normal guy and talk with it in a normal accent, much like when Kofi Kingston dropped the Jamaican stuff. He gets to show off who he truly is, and basically they talk about how DX was basically the Attitude Era before they called it the Attitude Era. Like Stone Cold Steve Austin was on TV, he was acting like he was Stone Cold Steve Austin. DX was on TV and they were acting like DX. It wasn't until it really took a hold of what was going on that they branded the Attitude Era, but it was a lot of people just acting like they normally were in real life. A lot of this was talking about how basically both of these companies were fighting tooth and nail, but all of these guys really stayed together as a team. You could see that Kevin Nash is coming out to the ring and he throws the Kliq up and he says, "Right back at you, HBK," basically talking to his friend that he knows is going to be watching the show that night. That he misses them. They talk about how WCW came to a part where it closed, and when it closed, basically Shawn Michaels had to have stopped wrestling because of his back problems when he got thrown over the top rope at the Royal Rumble and came down on top of the casket. It messed his back up to the point where basically he was still able to wrestle against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. But after that, he took a nice little break. I believe he took 4 to 6. I always get that number mixed up. I think it's 6 years, but then again, that seems like a long time for somebody to be gone and come back so great. But it's no, it's got to be 4. Isn't it from 98 until 2002? Yeah, it's 4 years. That makes more sense. And at that point, when Shawn Michaels leaves, Triple H picks up the ball and runs with DX in a very... It was sort of gutsy, sort of thing to sort of try and take over for his friend and run DX. I think the DX was supposed to be, a heel persona, but basically I think so many people loved what Triple H did with DX that they had to turn babyface with X-Pac, and then they added the New Age Outlaws, who wasn't talked about on the show at all. And they sort of talk about how Hunter was able to pick up the ball and really run with it. They talk about, Triple H taking over in 99 and 2000 and, really being the guy that is really running wrestling, which is kind of crazy because at that point, basically all of the guys that he used to ride with were basically done inside of wrestling. I mean, you can think of Kevin Nash's career. They talk about him coming back in 2002 with the NWO and people not being really happy about the NWO coming back to WWE. Basically, everybody being scared of the backstage politics that were run in WCW by Kevin Nash. They even talked about Kevin Nash being Booker at WCW. That stuff was gold. But, once they finally bring back the NWO, They say that the Kliq reunion wouldn't be at its best until, Shawn Michaels came back for SummerSlam of 2002. But they don't even talk about the fact that the reunion's not even full because Scott Hall had been fired after the European tour on the plane ride from hell. Basically, so April of 2002, he was fired. Shawn came back in August, and they started running together. But they probably had a good moment with the way it ended, with basically talking about Scott Hall going into the Hall of Fame, and Kevin Nash talking about how reunited these guys are throughout all the times. They don't talk about them, and basically Shawn Michaels had a fallout with Triple H because he blamed him for not being featured on WWE television. Vince had to come to the point where he told Shawn that he was being sent home and he wasn't going to be able to come back because he was showing up to the shows fucked up, and he wasn't able to do the small things that they needed him to do. To do promos, to book shows, not book shows, but he was the commissioner, so he was trying to get those things over, and he wasn't able to do it. So basically, Vince got to the point where fuck it, send him home. We won't use him no more, and Shawn took it as Triple H stabbed him in the back, and it was basically a phone call from Kevin Nash that was able to put the Kliq, back together piece by piece. I think they've had fallouts, but that's probably the biggest fallout that they've ever had before. But there's been talks about the Kliq going into the Hall of Fame together. I believe that was for WrestleMania 29, I think, is when that was coming about. And I remember thinking how stupid that was going to be. You got all these big names in there. Shawn's already been in. I'm guessing more than likely that Triple H is a guy that's not going to go in for a long time because of his position in WWE, the same reason why Vince McMahon hasn't been put into the WWE Hall of Fame. Scott Hall just got in last year as a solo guy. X-Pac is a questionable guy. I mean, he would be probably pretty favorable if DX got put into a group, but I've always been down on groups going into the WWE Hall of Fame, especially this not even being a real tag team or a real sort of faction. It's like a backstage thing that was anointed on him by Bam Bam Bigelow and Lex Luger for not really going along with what everybody else was doing. Kevin Nash is the guy that should have been put in the Hall of Fame a long time ago. I would have put Kevin Nash in before the fact of putting Scott Hall in, but I think they wanted that feel-good moment of Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall going in. More than likely, it sounds like Diamond Dallas Page will be going in this year, so sort of you have that whole triad of guys that have been put together, all going in together. But this was an awful great episode. They talk a lot about the backstage fallout from the Kliq cam at Madison Square Garden. Every time I see that video, I notice different things about it. I just started noticing this year how much the guy shooting it, or at least how much the guy that is close to the guy shooting it, is marking out for this whole deal. And honestly, when Vince McMahon was saying that there was heat coming down him and that somebody had to be punished and he was going to punish Triple H, the easiest way out of that is just by saying, we gave the fans what they wanted. Listen to that fan about how crazy he's going, that he's actually seeing Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels all in the ring, having a hug and, being together. Like at first, when they start, all coming into the ring, the guy's marking out thinking that they're all going to fight. And then after the end, he finds out that they're all a big, group of friends. I mean, you're giving the people what they want to see. And, as long as you're doing that, you're making money. I mean, I don't think anybody didn't go to the next Madison Square Garden show because of the fact that those 4 guys inside of the ring square to hug. But they show clips of guys talking about it, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they're just like, that's not the way business is done. You got to protect the business. You can't be telling that we're friends. You can't be riding in the cars together. You can't be doing this and that. Basically, if you're in a program together and you want people to show up and see you fight, you don't do stuff like this, or people aren't going to believe. It's sort of like you can see 2 actors walk down the street and share a coffee or something like that, and then they can go have a shootout in a movie and it's up on the screen and that's no big deal. But this is professional wrestling. We're selling the fact that we're really beating the hell out of each other, and you just don't do it. So I see both sides of it. But great episode of Monday Night War. This is episode 17, I do believe. So we're coming up on the end. I don't know if there's 20 or 24. They are getting a little bit repetitive, but honestly, it is one of the biggest things that I look forward to seeing uploaded onto the WWE Network each week. So I'm hoping you're loving it as much as I'm loving it. Peace out, everybody.